Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today, both in person and online. We're really excited to have our customer with us here, Josh Ring from Faith Technologies. He's going to share how iAuditor has helped him and his business apply the learnings and data that they've been able to pull out. And these are big impacts that he's had. It's been human impacts within his business. So really excited to walk you guys through that whole trajectory that they've had. To kick us off here, we're going to do some quick introductions. So I am Shannon Myers. I am a team lead here at Safety Culture within our North America office. I support our customer success team, and I've also had the pleasure of working with some of our really large and strategic customers for the last 2 years. I also have here with me my good friend and colleague, Claire Maples, who I'd like to introduce or have her introduce herself next.
Thanks, Shannon. Funny enough, Shannon and I started 1 week apart just 2 years ago, and we were on the stage for the first time at the summit 2 years ago. So we've come quite the way. But as Shannon said, my name's Claire Maples. I'm a senior customer success manager. And for the last 2 years, I think something that I've taken away from this role, or my favorites, are just building relationships with our customers and seeing directly the impact that iAuditor has on the business. And that's why I have my friend and customer Josh Ring with us today. So for the last year, I've worked really closely with Josh. But until yesterday morning at 8 a.m., Josh and I would meet virtually. So for the last year, monthly, it was me, Josh, a couple deers on the wall of his basement office. So we've got quite the upgrade yesterday. But just to share a few fun things about Faith before I hand it over to you. Faith has 850 users nationwide, and over the last year and a half since they've been using iAuditor, they've conducted a little over 64,000 inspections. So that's a ton of inspections and also a ton of paper that they've saved. With that comment, I learned that Josh's family also has a tree farm, so that lines nicely. So Josh, why don't I hand it over to you if you want to share a little bit about Faith, your role, and maybe how iAuditor ties into it.
So a little bit about that tree farm comment there. Claire was talking about how much paper we saved, and I was like, on the back side of that, my dad harvests paper for trees for the paper mills. So coming from the family business side of things, saving paper might not necessarily be the best thing, but from an environmental standpoint or the amount of paperwork that we're saving the company, it is a good thing. So thank you for that introduction. My name is Josh Ring. I am a senior safety manager with Faith Technologies. Faith Technologies is part of FTI, where we also have Accelerate Manufacturing and NTech Solutions. So we're able to serve our customer from the pre-planning and development phases of any electrical type projects that they have, all the way through implementation of building and constructing that project to the maintenance and customer service aspect at the end. So we're able to, with the different aspects of FTI, help serve our customers from the beginning to the end of their projects. As far as myself specifically, I'm a senior safety manager. So I serve a region of people in northern Wisconsin. So a little bit different atmosphere than here. It's starting to get a little bit cold up there. The lakes will be frozen in a month or so here, maybe a little bit later. But so I serve the northern Wisconsin region as a safety manager and really work to be that resource for the employees in my area to provide the best safety information that I can for them. On the weekends, I enjoy going out in the woods and hunting and being by myself, and that's where you got to see my deer heads on the wall in my office at home.
I feel like you're missing a key thing about Faith and the Super Bowl of safety.
Last year in 2020, we did win the Grand National Construction Safety of Excellence Award. So that was a very prestigious award for our company to win. When compared to other construction companies throughout the nation, to have the best safety program and be recognized for the safety results that we're driving within our company, it was very great to receive that award.
Yeah, round of applause.
All right, thanks again, Josh, for being here. We really appreciate it. So we're going to walk through first the data maturity curve to kind of set this up and take you all through each stage of this journey and how Josh really implemented different things at each stage to get to the success that his team has achieved. We can tell here, obviously, this doesn't quite look like a curve as much as a ladder maybe, which ladders are easier to climb than curves. So we'll just start going through this. First off, we're going to have our comply stage. This is typically where you're moving from paper to a digital solution, or maybe from an Excel to a digital solution of some kind. You're just kind of getting started in the process. As we move into consolidate, you tend to align on that one really critical use case. For Josh, we're going to talk through that one in a second, something that's going to make a big impact in your business. We tend to see customers sometimes get stuck here for a little while where maybe they're trying to do too many things at once. So we're going to talk through some best practices that Josh's team implemented. Then you get into your analyze stage. This is where you're getting some data coming in. It's telling you a bit of a story, but we know we kind of need to go a level deeper to apply those learnings. That's where we get into the boost business stage, which is really where things start to get exciting. So we're going a little bit level deeper here. We're going to talk through what Josh did with iAuditor to be able to get that next level of data and start applying some of those things to his business. And then finally, long-term strategy. You're iterating on your process. You're taking feedback from your team. That's a big part of what Josh did. And then we're going to be sharing some really exciting outcomes that his team achieved. So to start climbing this ladder, Josh, we're going to start in the comply stage. So can you just tell us a little bit to start out here about what the inspection process looked like when you got to Faith and why you decided to pitch iAuditor to your leadership team?
Yeah, as far as the inspection process went, we were completing inspections and getting information, but the inspections were on different formats. You'd have some departments using Word, some using Excel, some using Smart Sheets, other, different. We were even using a different auditing software at that time, and we weren't talking throughout each department. So we knew we needed to comply, we knew we needed to do these audits, but we were just really looking for a solution to bring it all together and make it work better for us as we're collecting that data.
And then we know it's really important to, identify those key stakeholders really early in the process. And you've kind of already mentioned that your leadership team was involved in iAuditor from the very beginning or making that decision. So outside of your leadership, can you share who those key stakeholders were that you kind of looped into this?
Yeah, we were, as you hinted at, we were blessed to have our executive management and our upper leadership already bought into changing the system over. So where you heard some of the struggles earlier in presentations were how do we sell this to upper management, we already had that buy-in. So they were already committed to this change, which really streamlined the process for us to get moving a little bit faster because we didn't necessarily have to pitch it. Those key stakeholders that really helped us out were our communications team, our IT department, our business technologies department, the safety team. Really, those main stakeholders that needed to know how the program was going to work for us and what data we could collect with it and how we needed to distribute that within the company.
Yeah, and I think if you're thinking my organization might not be the same size as Faith, we typically see making sure you have your champion, so your Josh Ring to drive the initiative, an admin, someone who's really going to be able to help manage the application, and then whoever that executive kind of decision maker is. So now that we've kind of moved on from the comply, so really going from paper to a digital process, it's all about consolidating, so taking all those different tools that you were using and being able to pull that into one. And so we know for Faith, you guys started with one inspection, and I think Gary hit on this a little bit earlier, is you can start small or maybe what's going to be the most impactful. And so at Faith, you guys started with the field safety audit. So what is the field safety audit and what is the purpose of it?
So the field safety audit is our general audit that we created that any of our field employees can utilize to identify hazards out in the field. So as I said before, we're a large company, we're throughout the United States, but we needed an audit that could work for somebody that was in a customer service van or a large strategic project where we have our big construction projects going on with 300 plus people on it. We needed that one audit to work throughout all those different aspects. And from that safety standpoint, we just wanted them to have those quick hit identification of hazards and make sure that we had the right tool there for that process.
Yeah, I think here, Josh, too, is really where your team showed an example of a best-in-class implementation of iAuditor. There were a lot of things that you did, but I think we want to highlight some of the really things that we think made the biggest difference. So where you started, you did start out with hundreds of licenses, but you broke it down to some small, trusted pilot groups to start out. Can you talk to us about why you decided to take that approach?
What I wanted to make sure was that when I developed this audit, as I discussed in my intro, being a regional-based safety manager, I had those touches already with my employees that trusted me, and I trusted them to get me the right information, that right feedback. So they could text me on my phone, give me a call. Like I had that personal connection. So when I was developing this audit, I was able to also make my field visits and make sure that those employees were getting the questions they needed, and I could kind of tweak it behind the scenes. And then when I had that go ahead, we worked out the bugs, everything was all good with that small pilot group, my close people in northern Wisconsin. Then we opened it up to phase 2, which was the state of Wisconsin. And then after a couple weeks of that second phase, we opened it up to all of our users and brought in 500 users onto that phase 3 and took it nationally. And the nice thing about that is that we worked out a lot of those kinks ahead of time within those departments that needed to be tied into the program. It wasn't just massively releasing this program and trying to figure it out as we go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a theme really throughout your whole journey. You're always taking the feedback of your team, your frontline users, to be able to tweak the template, tweak the process, and really make it work for them based on the way that they work every day. The next thing that you did that I think sometimes gets a little bit overlooked in the rollout process was the technology piece. So making sure that everyone had their devices ready to roll. You actually had your teams pre-downloaded with iAuditor. You had it set up with single sign-on so they could easily sign on. We talked about how in certain cases you had people set up more with the desktop app. You had them really enabled for whatever worked best for them and the way that they work. Another important thing that we just wanted to call out here in terms of single sign-on or SSO, that is now included in our premium subscription. So if you're out there and you have not integrated with SSO yet, please get with your CSM or account team after this, and we'd be happy to get you guys set up with that.
Good call. Definitely can't remember more than one passwords myself. So I would think really the final part of your rollout that you had really nailed down was just involving that communication team. So you brought them on as a key stakeholder from the beginning, and they really brought on the communication team to make sure that they were driving a strategic or a consistent message throughout the process. So their communication team, they really leveraged them to send out communication on the why of using iAuditor, what was expected of them, and also leveraging them for training. So ensuring that their team was equipped with the proper training, and also by recording that information, they now have a whole library of different resources that they can access. So definitely if you can leverage your communications team with the rollout. If not, we have a really new exciting feature coming within the app called Heads Up. So definitely find one of us to talk about that afterwards if you're interested. And then I think the last piece here of consolidate is just, and sometimes where we lose that momentum is how do you maintain engagement after a rollout? And Faith is really unique in that they actually tie iAuditor to their gain share incentive program. So what is the gain share incentive program and how does that fit in with iAuditor?
So to drive safety and make sure that everybody is keeping up with the tasks that they need to do, our gain share incentive is a quarterly bonus payout. As part of that program, they're required to do 2 audits per week on their job sites, and that's foreman level and up on that job site. So we have our leadership, those people that know and understand those hazards, collecting and giving us that information through the audits. We also tie it into Click Safety, which is another program that we use, and then our monthly communication, our corporate communication, our monthly meeting with Mike, or our M3 call. So there's different aspects that we tie safety into everything for that quarterly gain share payout. As long as they meet those requirements, they get paid out their quarterly bonus, and on they go.
Pretty nice. I think another thing to remind everybody of too, we've seen a lot of different types of incentive programs with our customers. So it may not be monetary for you. It could be recognition based. You might offer your team some additional PTO. I mean, who doesn't like that, right? So just think about other different ways that you might be able to use some of those things to drive engagement from the beginning and really keep that going throughout the process too.
People also love pizza parties. That was one of the
parties.
things I learned as a safety
Always
manager.
a hit.
Pizza is worth more than money, probably.
Motivated by food.
All right, so we're going to move into our analyze phase, which is where Josh started getting some data coming in. We actually want to share with you the first 6-month snapshot that he was taking a look at as he got started here. So with the first step here, typically customers are looking at compliance as kind of your baseline metric. Luke mentioned earlier in yesterday's presentation that we try to move from just compliance to really best practices. And that's where Josh and his team have ultimately gotten to. But to start out here, this was the first 6 months. We already had over 18,000 inspections conducted. We knew that you guys were off to a good start. People were compliant. People were conducting those inspections. Your engagement was high. Then you kind of started focusing in on your top failed items and hazards. You got down to that top 10 failed item list, which is always a customer favorite in our analytics platform. Can you just talk a little bit about what you were looking at there?
So as we continued to collect this data, like you said, 18,000 audits, 5,000 hazards in 6 months of rolling out the program, we were getting a lot of data, and we were really just focusing in on those top 10 items, as you said, where it was usually slips, trips, and falls, items across walkways, maybe a cord wasn't inspected, or things like that. And what we were allowed, or what we were doing, is now that we got that information, we were able to work with our communications department to have a more targeted approach in the messaging that we could give our employees. So before, in the beginning, as we talked about that need to comply, everyone was kind of all over the place. Well, now that we had this data, we could say, hey, slips, trips, and falls, this is our most common hazard that you're all going to be, encountering on a construction site. Pretty straightforward. But then we could dive into, these are the control methods to use. These are the solutions we have available to you as an employee. These are the things that we can do to really help you be successful and safe on that job site by knowing that that was our number one hazard. And it really allowed us to give that more focused strategic messaging out there.
And then the last piece here, you really looked at average score. Sometimes this can be overlooked, especially for what the average score is actually kind of telling here. So as you can see, within the first 6 months for the field safety audit, you had a pretty high average score. What insights did this really give your team?
So when we were looking at the average score, you have to remember that we were using that field leadership safety audit for identifying hazards. And we were identifying a lot of failed items. But what we also looked at too, from the standpoint of that data collection, is looking at, all right, there's a lot of people that aren't identifying a hazard or have a 100% score. And we had to get people out of that mindset as we all go through our education and schooling. We want 100% on everything. We want a top score, right? Well, when we're identifying hazards, that goes against what you're looking at. So we needed to do that coaching and training that it's okay to fail items. It's okay to not have that 100% score. We are using it to not have a 100% score. So we've started to see that percentage drop down. But when we get an audit in, 2 or 3 failed items, that's going to be right around that 93, 92%. And that's most commonly what we're seeing by identifying those quick hazards that they're seeing out there.
Yeah, so leadership was really focused in on kind of the compliance piece, the top failures, and the average score. But you have a different set of users, your project managers, that are really just looking at their region or area, if you can say. So how did they utilize the analytics a little bit differently than your leadership team?
So as far as how we set up our sites, so we decided to turn on sites for our audits because we tied that all into each job number. So as a project manager, again, keep in mind we're a national company. Project managers have jobs throughout different states. And when we go through and we're looking at 18,000 different audits, well, I'm a project manager. I really just want to focus in on the safety message on my job sites. So what we did is when we set that up and wanted them to use it specifically for their job areas, we have the employees type in a job number, which is tied to each job, and then it gives the project manager a brief description, and then they just type in their name in the region and analytics. So by them typing in their name, they have analytics to pull up their data on their specific hazards for their field leaders on their jobs. So now they can drive that specific message and identify and correct those hazards for the employees working their specific projects. So it's allowed us to take all this corporate information from the company as a whole and break it up into small, manageable sections that each project manager can be responsible for driving the safety within their area.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, like, as your implementation was going on, you thought about more than just the data that the leadership team was looking at and how your project managers could benefit from making it super streamlined. I think this is a quick plug for sites too. If you maybe haven't enabled sites for your group or you're not finding enough value out of it, you can definitely think outside of the box like Josh's team did. Maybe you want to use them to document your customers or the different equipment classes. One thing that's been a holdup too for a lot of customers is just getting out of the mindset that they're labeled sites, areas, and region. And so this has been a customer ask for a while. So coming soon, you'll soon be able to rename those as well. So your region can be your project manager soon.
Sounds good.
I think the other day you said you were ecstatic about that, Josh.
I was ecstatic. I am
right.
ecstatic. This is my ecstatic voice. So.
That's right. So from here, you were getting some data coming in. We knew we had to go a level deeper to really get to what that root cause was for your slips, trips, and falls as that #1 hazard that you guys had. Can you just talk to the audience a little bit about what you did to actually revise your template and get to that next level of data so that you could ultimately impact your injury rate?
Yep. So I think it's important as being a safety champion of iAuditor within Faith, or if you're the safety champion for iAuditor at your company, look at the data you're collecting and see, is this data telling me what I need to know? So when I looked and saw all these slip, trip, and fall hazards, I originally had it as a yes-no question. And unless they attached a picture or gave me a note, I really didn't know what it was. So as I was always looking to improve, or as I am always looking to improve, I took it and used logic behind the scenes. So if they select that there's a slip, trip, and fall hazard, then I have a drop-down menu of identify what that slip, trip, and fall hazard is. And by doing that on the analytics page, then I can see a more clear picture in that pie graph of, all right, so we have slips, trips, and falls. It's always our #1 most common hazard on a job site. But now I know that the top 3 slips, trips, and falls are uneven walking working surfaces, wet or slippery floors, and I know coming into the winter months here, it's going to be icy walkways as that slush and snow gets around there. So by giving them options, you can see how that data tracks and trends throughout the year, calendar year, and look at that over time. And now we can be more proactive by knowing that not only is that our most common failed item, but now I can really dive in specific on these are the solutions to implement. So by asking the question how I needed to ask it, not how I thought it necessarily had to be asked at first, really allowed me to get that data that I needed to dive into.
Yeah, so you just mentioned winter months coming up. It's likely going to be because of, different weather, why the slip, trips, and falls slip, trips, and falls. So one of the things too is just we've talked about a lot with your communication team. So bringing in your communications team to leverage them to share out this message, especially with the upcoming winter months. So can you share just a little bit about how you get this information to the teams that it's directly impacting?
So how we get this information out, there's multiple avenues. Again, Faith is blessed to have a communications department where they make sure that the employees get the information they need. So when we identify these items, we determine, is this something that needs to go out today in our daily safety bulletin? Can we put it out in our weekly digest? Or is this a corporate change that needs to take place on our corporate message coming directly from the CEO? And again, all of those components with the hazards that we're identifying, I work with that communications team, the safety department, to determine how we can effectively get that message out there and get the employees the information that they need.
Yeah, I think if you kind of feel like maybe you're in this stage of your iAuditor journey, a couple of things that you can do is just implement logic if you haven't already. They've found Faith specifically just a ton of value in actually identifying the root causes of some of those top failures. So if you need some help or support on this, definitely reach out to your iAuditor account team. We'd be happy to run you through this. So really for the final stage here, just kind of looking at the long-term strategy and outcome, some of the things that Faith has, continued to implement that you all can at your organization as well is just first is making sure that you have your iAuditor champion. So who is the Josh Ring at your organization? It's really vital. And the second piece of that is taking all of the feedback, and that's definitely been a common theme over the past day and a half, is actually taking the feedback from your team and implementing it. So they regularly maintenance the template just to make sure that the data that they're collecting is very pertinent. And then finally, just how do you, kind of how he mentioned, leveraging the communications team to get this message out. And so by sharing the impact that iAuditor has had to several different business units, this has allowed them to expand iAuditor out into different departments. So he mentioned earlier, they're also in manufacturing. So their manufacturing team uses iAuditor for safety and also several 5S inspections. So with that, I figured I'll hand it back over to Josh, really just to take us home on some of the impacts that iAuditor has had directly at Faith.
So as we look at the data that we've been collected since we rolled this out in January of 2020, I can't believe we've done 64,000 audits. It's just, and I feel like we've been in the program so much longer than just almost 2 years here. But we've noticed that these daily touches, these weekly touches that we're getting with the data are really allowing people to become more aware of the hazards that they're exposed to. So it's one thing to talk about identification of hazards, but it's that regular touch of, all right, I need to look for slip, trip, and fall hazards, or did I get all my inspections completed? Do I have the right permits? Things like that, that it may not be on their job site today, but since they're familiar with the program and audit, they're able to remember that information, or I do need to go look for that, or I do need to ask for that, or when the work site changes, they're able to be ready for those changes and not have that reactive mindset out in the field, but they're more proactive, which we all know keeps people safer when we're identifying hazards prior to hazards becoming injuries. So as we look at our numbers this year, compared to last year we ended the year with a total recordable incident rate of 0.44, which was awesome. We worked over 5.5 million man hours. This year we're at over 5 million man hours to date, and we have 5 recordable injuries, and we have a TRIR right now of 0.16. We are in the construction industry. We have 5 recordable injuries. We have almost 3,000 employees around the nation doing hard electrical construction. And by utilizing this information, driving specific messages, and getting the employees the information they need, you can see here we've had a reduction of recordable incidents by 68%. We had great numbers last year, and this year we're doing even better. And iAuditor has been part of that process to make sure that people are aware of those hazards, identifying those hazards, and we're doing what we can as a company to make sure that they have what they need to make it home safe at the end of each night.
It's a phenomenal incident rate, by the way. I think we should give Josh a round of applause.
And one of the things, thank you, and one of the things that we always talk about is your why, and that's been a common message that we've heard throughout all these presentations is that we care about people and we want people to get home. And we always talk about what's your why at Faith. We all have a why. That why changes from day to day. Maybe we have a vacation or an event or something that we want to get to, but we want to make sure that we can get home to those people that depend on us. And as it says on the screen, there's no monetary value. That return on investment that we look about with that dollar value, there's not a dollar value to go home and have my son give me a hug when I get home from the airport. Like, everybody that, we can get home safe, that's what our end goal is. So iAuditor is just part of that process to help keep our employees safe and make it home to their whys at the end of every night.
Absolutely. Well, that's really what it's all about for us. We want to help our customers really be able to help your team work better and more safely every day. And so thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Josh. I hope everybody got some good learnings and takeaways no matter what stage of your journey you might be at. I'd like to give Josh one more round of applause. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much.